Are y'all watching this mega civil war? Get your popcorn out. If you haven't watched it, I'm going to tell you what's going on. So, there's a war, and it's over HB1 visas. If you don't know what that is, a HB1 visa is reserved for people that are highly qualified, highly skilled to come to the U.S. to, feel hard to fill jobs. So engineers and tech people and things like that. So Elon Musk makes a tweet saying, oh, hey, we want to expand this program. Make sure you keep it in place because that's how I got here. And I was able to build all these companies off of it. We're going to keep this program going strong. Donald Trump says, yep, we sure are. Okay, but here's the thing. HB1 visas, that's immigration. That's increasing immigration when Donald Trump said he was going to decrease immigration.
So the guy who built his entire campaign on we're closing the borders just endorsed expanding a visa program, and everyone's shocked? Bro, the base wasn't sold a policy, they were sold a feeling. And feelings don't hold up the second an actual policy decision has to get made. This is what happens when you lead with emotion instead of substance. The moment reality shows up, the whole thing cracks.
So the Republican Party went absolutely bananas. Bannon, which is used to be Trump's senior political guy that went to prison for Trump, told Elon Musk that he was a toddler. And Nikki Haley went in on it, and they're just going back and forth. They are imploding. So if you haven't jumped over to the MAGA Civil War, go watch it. Go watch it. It's the best thing you're going to see today. They are imploding.
So I'm sorry to tell you guys, but there's a civil war breaking out in the MAGA world. Apparently there's some conflicts between low information, low income MAGA voters and their billionaire overlords. I mean, who could have seen this coming? Tech CEOs have been saying for 30, 40 years that there aren't enough engineers in the United States and we need to educate more of them, which is why we need visas so that highly skilled immigrants can come here and do the jobs that Americans can't. And unfortunately, MAGA voters are just finding this out now. But I'm curious, what did MAGA voters think was going to happen? Did they think they would walk up to Vivek Ramaswamy or Elon Musk and say, yeah, I want one of them rocket jobs? And the hiring manager's like, so did you go to engineering school? My degree's from the School of Hard Knocks. Hiring manager's like, do they teach Python or SQL at the School of Hard Knocks by chance? My cousin Gooch caught a python in Florida. Republican leaders should have seen this coming, though. Like 40 years ago, they had to decide, do they want a highly educated voting public that they have to win over with sound policies? Or do they want a ignorant, low information voting public that they can easily control with religion and fear? They picked the latter and then spent the next 40 years destroying public education so they could manipulate the MAGA voters they need to win elections today. Wish I could say I felt bad, but Democrats have been watching this jackass tsunami build since like 2007, 2008. At this point, we're just numb to it and kind of laughing at it. Sorry, guys. But please do send my regards to Gooch and his new pet python.
The python joke is hilarious, but the point underneath it is brutal. 40 years of telling your base that education is elitist, that college is liberal indoctrination, that instinct beats expertise. And now those same people are standing in front of a hiring manager getting filtered out in the first 30 seconds. That's not an accident. That's a policy outcome. You can't gut public education for 4 decades, convince an entire generation that credentials don't matter, and then act confused when they're not competitive in a global tech market. The people who sold them that message knew exactly what they were doing. They needed voters, not engineers. And now the voters are finally realizing they were the product the whole time, not the priority.
There's been infighting in the MAGA movement because the tech right, vis-a-vis Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, basically called white Americans too dumb for tech jobs. And that eventually turned into, a lot of stories of people being like, I'm a white man and I had this SAT score and I couldn't get into this college and it's unfair. And a couple things. First of all, if you were over the age of 19 and remember your SAT score, I need you to get rid of that immediately and replace it with something useful, like how to properly clean your humidifier or how to 3D print a ghost gun. Just some suggestions, but ultimately your choice. And second, SAT scores are mostly an indicator of wealth, not intelligence. If you come from a stable, wealthy family, you have better access to education. So whenever I met someone with a good SAT score, I was never like, oh, you must be so smart. I was like, oh, you must be sort of rich at least. And if you're rich and have a bad SAT score, hit me up because you're just my type.
She's absolutely right, and the data backs it up completely. Kids from high-income households score hundreds of points higher on average, not because of raw intelligence, but because of access, tutors, prep courses, stable home environments, time to actually study. So when grown men are posting SAT scores from decades ago like it's proof of something, all they're really proving is their parents had disposable income. That's the whole flex. Meanwhile, the H-1B engineers they're furious about competing with, many of them had none of those advantages. No legacy admissions, no safety nets, no connections. They just outworked everyone around them. The scoreboard they're pointing at doesn't measure what they think it measures.
Here's how I know without a doubt that MAGA and the Christian nationalist movement behind it in Project 2025 is a cult. Not that I haven't known this the whole time. Across the continuum of morality, there is one group that pretty much nationwide, internationally, in every context, is the most hated and the most despicable. Even in prison, where there are murderers and thieves and all sorts of bad people. Who goes first? You guessed it, pedophiles. Historically, whether you're white, black, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, that is the one group of people that we pretty much all agree are all the most disgusted by. And they cause the most harm long term. So MAGA has flip-flopped and done mental gymnastics over lots of things, saying at one point that we need this, and then the second that it no longer fulfills their agenda, flipping, right? But the one thing that they've flipped really hard on is their stance on pedophilia. Trump literally ran on the promise of releasing the Epstein files, and so did all of his followers.
This is where it stops being funny and starts being genuinely uncomfortable. Because the Epstein files weren't some fringe conspiracy, this was a centerpiece campaign promise. The base was sold justice. They were told, finally, the people protecting the worst of the worst were going to be exposed, and then the files got blocked. Quietly, with barely a whisper of outrage from the same crowd that spent years screaming about it. That silence tells you more about cult psychology than any textbook could. When the promise that mattered most gets broken and the reaction is nothing, that's not loyalty anymore. That's something else entirely.
All the big conservative podcasters were talking about it. If you vote for Trump, he's going to release the Epstein files, and all of these awful, the worst of the elites, the pedophiles, are going to get justice. And then Trump and Republicans have, across the board, blocked the release of the Epstein files. Just yesterday, Ted Cruz said, quote, "We need to stop attacking pedophiles." If MAGAs are hearing that and seeing what's going on with the Epstein files and still doubling down and saying, this is our guy, this is our Christ-like figure, this is a cult. Because like I said, people across the board, across all the spectrums, tend to agree on one thing, that harming children, especially sexually, is absolutely the worst thing that you can do, and even really evil, bad people will go for those people first. So what does it say about you, MAGA? That your movement is now the guardians and protectors of pedophiles. I can't think of a single argument that you could use to justify blocking the Epstein files.
Neither can I, honestly. And that's the point. There is no good faith argument. Every attempt to justify it falls apart immediately under basic scrutiny, which means the people defending it aren't operating on logic, they're operating on identity. When your political identity becomes more important than your actual stated values, in some states, when you'll defend the indefensible just to stay consistent with your team, that's the definition of captured thinking. And the really dark part? Most of them know it doesn't add up. They just can't afford to admit it, because admitting it means everything else crumbles too.
How can you swindle that around? What debate tactics here could you use? Even if someone voted for Trump, who is not a racist or not a pedophile, they are going to have to live with the fact for the rest of their life that the KKK endorses Trump, that Laura Loomer, who has been openly racist, is a huge, huge part of MAGA, and that one of the most notorious pedophiles in the history of this country is being protected by the president, who was one of his close friends. And on top of that, Republicans are trying to lower the age of consent in many states. This is not moral gray area. It's become very black and white. MAGA, you can keep doubling down and be on the side of history that sided with racists, pedophiles, misogynists, the list goes on. Or you could wake up now and say, shit, I didn't think it was going to be this bad. I was bamboozled by a man who is known for being fraudulent and liar. That's okay. But doubling down as they dig their grave and solidify themselves as the party of hate discord, and harming children, you either are one of those things or you're okay with those things, which is disgusting and embarrassing.
Look, she said it plainly and she's right. At some point, I didn't know stops being a valid defense. The information has been available. The patterns have been visible. The contradictions have been documented in real time. The people still doubling down now aren't uninformed. They're committed. And there's a difference. One you can fix with better information. The other requires something much harder. The willingness to admit you were wrong publicly, after years of being loud about being right. Most people would rather die on the hill than walk back down it. That's just human nature. But it's also how movements become permanent embarrassments in the history books.
Udo, what's happening right now with the MAGA civil war? Talk to us.
The movement is imploding from within when it comes to the issues of visas. Now, we're not talking about Melania's Einstein visa. Whether she's a genius or not is up for debate. We're talking about the Q1 visas. And so on one side, you have Elon and Ramaswamy, Vivek, in favor of bringing in people who either in technology field, medical field, have special skills and who clearly contribute to the economy, versus the hardcore MAGA movement, Laura Loomer, Steve Bannon, who want to focus on Americans and Americans only, the America First movement. And there's also an element of racism. So I would say that I only half agree with the Elon Ramaswamy faction. Yes, immigrants add to the economy of this country, especially people who are skilled. However, they're ignoring the other half of the equation. People who are here, documented and undocumented, the people that do the basic jobs, the jobs that fulfill a requirement, that fulfill in the service industry, that fulfill the basic needs of the country, we need those people too. And those people add to the economy as well. In the final analysis, the tech side is only half correct. But it shouldn't be to create sweatshops and to exploit people and to only enrich the wealthy oligarchs. That is the problem with the MAGA movement. It's been taken over by the ultra wealthy. It's not a movement that's for the little man. And all of the MAGA hardcore supporters of Trump are going to get a rude awakening when they discover that Social Security and Medicare are on the chopping block.
This is the one that should be cutting through all the noise. Not the visa drama, not the Twitter beef, this. The programs that millions of working class voters depend on to literally survive are being quietly lined up for cuts by the exact people they put in power. The billionaire faction was never coming to save anyone making under six figures. They came to deregulate, cut taxes at the top, and now they're eyeing the social safety net. The working class voter thought they were getting a champion. They got a contractor who sublet the job to the people they were already mad at, and the invoice is coming.
And it's no surprise that Trump has finally broken his silence and has taken sides in the civil war. He's clearly on the side of Ramaswamy and Elon because all he cares about is money and enriching himself. He doesn't care about the little guy, the blue-collar worker.
Because it isn't. I have met MAGA supporting Republicans that are Jewish, Catholic, Hindu, Wiccan, and a hell of a lot of atheists. I know what you're thinking. Becky, how could that possibly be? We're the party of love and peace. We're the party of truth and reason. We're the party of science. How could these people choose your side? Perhaps, and I'm just guessing here, but maybe it's because if somebody doesn't go along with every single aspect of the liberal agenda, you humiliate, ostracize, and bully them. Perhaps it wasn't the best idea to tell all women who don't want biological men competing in women's sports that they're hateful, evil, transphobic bigots. Perhaps it wasn't the best idea to tell people of the Jewish faith that they were committing a genocide for wanting their own sovereign nation after, ironically enough, being the descendants of people who survived a genocide. Perhaps it was wrong to tell people of the Catholic faith, which is the majority of Latin American countries, that they hate women and just want to control their bodies for not agreeing with late-term abortion. Perhaps it wasn't the smartest move to tell all of the legal immigrants in this country that were originally on your side that they just need to sit down and shut up. That it's okay for someone to jump the border and not have to pay the fees, to not have to wait their turn in line because they're just so special and important that they don't think that they should have to.
She's making a point here that gets completely steamrolled by culture war noise, but it's one of the most legitimate grievances in this whole debate. Legal immigrants who followed every rule, paid every fee, waited years, watched the process get bypassed, and then got told to be quiet about it. That frustration is not bigotry. That's a fairness argument. And the left's consistent failure to distinguish between this system needs to be fixed and you're racist for noticing is a big part of why they keep losing people who were never actually on the far right to begin with. You don't win people back by calling them names for asking reasonable questions. You just push them somewhere worse.
And then to tell that legal immigrant, well, hey, I know that you're trying to get your mother over here, but we got to make room for all these other people who didn't do it the right way. And give them not only that, but we're going to give them $1,000 a month EBT cards. We're going to let them stay at the best hotels in Manhattan, all for free. They're going to take away your child's education because we got to clear out the school because we just don't have any more room at the fancy hotels anymore. The reality is the base is not evangelical. It's not Christian. We're not trying to make this a Christian nation. The red wave that just decimated the Democratic Party in the last election, and will probably continue to do so for the next few elections, is all of the people that you turned your back on.
This is not a drill. MAGA is in a full-blown civil war as Elon Musk is suspending dozens of top MAGA influencers from X and demonetizing their accounts. The MAGA Republican platform Conservative OG posted, "All of our influencers have now lost verification status as well as our own page. Our brand did nothing. We spoke out against HB1 visas and it appears that Elon Musk intentionally shut us down. Is this the new status quo for America's most free social media platform?" It's hilarious because this sect of the MAGA Republican Party keeps reposting one video where Trump was probably told to go on stage and say he wants to ban HB1 visas, but there's plenty of other videos where Trump says he believes that any international students who graduate from an American college should get automatic citizenship so they contribute to our economy instead of taking their talents elsewhere to make money in other countries. Do Republicans even know what their own president supports anymore? I highly doubt it.
America First was the slogan, but the MAGA movement is now at war with itself over what that means. Trump taunts Tucker Carlson. Marjorie Taylor Greene calls fellow MAGA hawks disgusting for pushing U.S. intervention in the Israel-Iran clash. A once unified bloc is publicly splintering, y'all. Here's the built-in contradiction. America First sounds simple, but America's fingerprints are everywhere. Global supply chains, oil routes, trade pacts, 750 military bases. The instant any of that feels threatened, Washington races to defend it, even if it means another war. You can't dominate the world and isolate from it at the same time. You can't be the global enforcer and the stay-at-home dad of geopolitics. The America First slogan and ideology was destined to break apart the moment reality tested it.
And there it is. The cleanest summary of this entire implosion. America First was never a policy, it was a bumper sticker. And bumper stickers don't survive contact with actual governance. You cannot be anti-immigration and pro-Silicon Valley. You cannot isolate from the world and maintain 750 military bases across it. You cannot shrink government and keep the programs your base depends on. These things are structurally incompatible. The people who designed the slogan knew that. They just figured they'd deal with the contradictions later. Well, later arrived, and the coalition that was held together by nothing but shared anger is now discovering anger was never enough of a foundation to build anything real on. This split was inevitable. The only question now is what comes next.
So Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson now warn, stay out of foreign wars. On that point, they're right. Endless intervention bleeds lives and dollars. But in the same breath, some in the MAGA camp hint at civil war if Trump is held accountable. They preach peace abroad, chaos at home. They claim to defend the republic while threatening to tear it apart. This split was inevitable. One MAGA faction wants restraint and accountability. The other wants power, projection, and permanent grievance. Both wave the same flag, but only one can define America first. The moment demands clarity, not cults of personality. Restraint overseas, responsibility at home. Let's start there.
So what did we just watch? A coalition built on anger instead of shared values finally imploded the moment those two things had to actually agree on something real. The visa fight is the funny part, the popcorn moment, but underneath it, a huge chunk of the working class got sold a dream that was always designed to benefit someone else. The people still doubling down aren't stupid, they're just not ready to admit it yet. Reality doesn't wait for ready. Drop a comment, does this coalition survive or is this the beginning of a permanent split? Like, share, subscribe, because this, nowhere near done.